Okay, so first I want to thank everyone for spending time with us today. On behalf of the Lawn Legumes program, we're excited to have all of you in attendance, and we hope that many of you will contribute as coaches and help residents throughout the planting process. So my name is James Wolfen. I'm representing Blue Thumb and Metro Blooms. I'm helping with the education and technical assistance portion of this programming. And with me today are Tara Klein and Dan Shaw. So Tara and Dan, would you mind introducing yourselves real quick?
I'm Tara Klein. I'm the Conservation Technician at Board of Water and Soil Resources.
And I'm Dan Shaw. I'm the Senior Ecologist and Vegetation Specialist with the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources.
I almost went a little too fast. Bear with me. There we go. So Bowser Board of Water and Soil Resources mission is to improve and protect the water and soil resources across the state of Minnesota. We partner with local organizations and private landowners. We're partnering with Blue Thumb on the individual component of the Launch Legumes grant. And Blue Thumb is a public-private partnership that works with over 50 organizations working together to educate landowners about reducing runoff and improving water quality. And Metro Blooms coordinates the Blue Thumb partnership. Metro Blooms is a nonprofit that promotes gardening and beautifies our communities. So today I'm going to give just a recap on lawns to legumes, and then we're going to get into the coaching aspect of it. So the Lawns to Legumes program is focused on establishing pollinator habitat on residential landscapes across Minnesota to support the rusty patch bumblebee and other pollinators. The rusty patch bumblebee was listed last year as the Minnesota State bee, but it was also listed nationwide on the federally endangered species list. So the program funding is coming from the Environment and Natural Resource Trust Fund, and the program started in June of 2019. This Lawns Legumes program has 3 different components. The public campaign, the public education and outreach campaign portion is a social media campaign to increase awareness about at-risk pollinators and to increase learning about the importance of creating habitat on residential property. So we're working in partnership with a number of different partners. There's a lot of great technical resources available. We're also working on a social media campaign with the Minneapolis College of Art and Design students, and you can see some of the beautiful artwork that's on the screen. That campaign started this past January, and so there's going to be artwork that's shown throughout the year with that hashtag Lawns to Legumes. And then we have the individual landowner support section, and so that's what we're going to be talking about a lot today. That's with the awarded grantees, so folks are eligible to still apply for up to $350. And we have coaches that we're going to be pairing up with the awardees. And then we have the demonstration neighborhood portion of the grant. That's community-based or community-focused, working on neighborhoods that are enhancing pollinator habitat in key corridors around the state. So just to dive a little bit deeper into the Lawns to Legumes individual support piece, there's a combination of workshops, coaching, cost share, all for installing native plants on residential properties. There's a lot of great technical resources out there. The first round of applications just recently closed in February, and we have a second round that just opened in March, and that's going to be closing in June. And that second group will be focusing on planting in the late summer and into the fall. So each round will have a year to complete the project. So applicants that are awarded are eligible for up to $350. They're asked to maintain the project for at least 3 years, to use native plant material, to protect their projects from pesticides during installation and during maintenance. They're going to be asked to submit before and after photos, as well as mapping the project, submitting paid receipts, and turning in 25% match for reimbursement. So some of that we'll get into a little bit later in the presentation. And so at the bottom is applications are accepted at bluethumb.org, and so folks can still continue to apply for those grants. And so on this page, we have the partner resource page. If you've already signed up to be a coach, thank you very much. If you're looking to sign up, we have this big arrow showing going to bluethumb.org to sign up to be a coach. They have their website for that. And then on the Board of Water and Soil Resources website, we have a Lawns to Legumes page as well that offers information about planting design templates. We have the habitat guide, a pollinator toolbox. But on this partner resource page, it's a way to just be able to collaborate and be a part of the program. That's where we have this coaching guide that you can find, and that's what the webinar is based off of today. There's a lot of great links in there as well. There's a fact sheet in there talking about what's acceptable or eligible for the grant, and a lot of good questions and answers in there. And then I just wanted to showcase a little timeline just to show you how much has been done. We haven't even gotten, we haven't reached the year mark yet, but so much work has been created and done. So the grant started in June 2019, and in January, the demonstration neighborhood folks were awarded. February, the first round closed, and then in March, we were awarded those first round applicants. And then in March again, the second round opened, and that's going to be closing in June. And then that brings us to today for the coaching webinar. And then in May, we're going to connect those coaches and individual support grantees to be able to work together.
Yeah, so thank you, Tara, for that introduction to the Lawns to Legumes program. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about coaching and the roles that you as coaches will play while you interact with those residents. So we're going to cover 3 main things here. First, the key principles for guiding residents along these projects. 2, the different types of coaching that is available. And then we'll have a questions and answers segment at the end of this presentation. So the role of coaches is just very simply, we need you to be able to provide some commitment to providing assistance to residents. We've done a survey of the different residents that are participating in this Lawns to Legumes program, and it varies from people who view themselves as experts in the field of gardening, where maybe you'll just have to confirm some plant choices, give a little bit of guidance. But we also have a lot of individuals who identify themselves as intermediate or novel gardeners who might need a little bit more hand-holding and guidance through these projects. We want you to use your best judgment as you guide residents through these projects, but we don't expect you to be an all-in-one, know-it-all resource. We want to make sure that you use the resources that Bowser's made available, those that Tara just showed you, and we want you to make sure that you feel comfortable coming to us, the experts at Blue Thumb and Metro Blooms. Me specifically, I'll be kind of your first resource there, and my email address will be listed later on in this presentation. And a good way for me to know that these coaches are active in interacting with residents is if my mailbox is full of requests and questions. So don't be afraid to contact me. We are happy to help you as you assist those residents. So we want to make sure that each resident has a clear expectation of what they will be getting from their coaches. We don't want you to be just overburdened and inundated with constant emails from residents. We want you and the resident to both know what to expect in this instance. So we are communicating that coaches will have the capacity for 3 coaching calls during the establishment and installation process of the project. And for site consultations, of course, there's some COVID-19 considerations to this that we'll be touching on later, but there will be capacity for 1 on-site consultation and 1 follow-up email or call to check in on progress. We'll talk a little bit more later on about how these on-site consultations are going to be run in light of COVID-19, but just know that we're limiting that to 1 per person. And ultimately, it will be up to you as coaches to determine just how much of a role you want to play in letting residents know how much time you have available. Where if you have the time and the willingness to go above and beyond those expectations that I've set, you are allowed to interact further with residents, but we just want to have that clear expectation set. So yes, with in terms of COVID-19 considerations and how that'll affect your experience interacting with residents. So as of now, we normally have in-person workshops, but we're transitioning all of that to the Zoom platform where they will be conducted as webinars or meetings. So if you want to volunteer at a workshop, volunteering during one of those Zoom webinars is an option to you. Coaches can assist with online webinars where you'll be working with residents online rather than at tables for the safety of all of our coaches and residents alike. Tabling at events is currently canceled until we get the go-ahead to hold and participate at public events. And our on-site consultations, or rather our in-person on-site consultations, are currently on hold until the shelter-in-place is lifted. For right now, we're replacing those with virtual consultations through Zoom, where just like we're meeting today, you'll meet via Zoom or some other online platform to help guide a resident in making the best decisions for their landscape. And Bowser and Metro Blooms will keep coaches updated about future plans for on-site consultations when we think those are safe to be conducted and we have permission to conduct such an on-site consultation. So please keep in mind that these are only for residential properties, and some residents may be eligible for either demonstration grants, demonstration neighborhood grants, individual grants, but not both. You can't double dip into this program here. So Dan, now I'll transition to you.
Okay, so I'll be covering topics related to site planning, and we're going to start with talking about vegetation selection for projects. As Tara discussed, there's a focus on the program about benefiting the rusty patch bumblebee, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has developed some information on what species are most beneficial to that bee. Some of those species are shown on this slide, including wild bergamot, columbine, bluebells. There's a big variety of species, and there's also some woody species that are included on that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service list that benefit the rusty patch bumblebee. The list is part of the assessment form, which is in the coaching guide, and we also have a link to that assessment form, and we'll talk more about that. James, it looks like I'm not advancing.
Okay, I can advance those slides for you if it's
okay.
If you're having some trouble there.
Blooming season is another important consideration with rusty patch bumblebee and other bee species. Some of them are active April through October, so it's important to have flower resources for those bee species through the whole season. So things that bloom in the spring, summer, and fall are all important. And species that are on that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service list are broken up into those flowering times, and so that can be a useful guide. Some of the shrub species can be really important in the spring when some other plants aren't blooming. So that's another good consideration for using shrubs in the spring. Next slide. With aesthetic considerations, this is something that we think is important with these projects to make sure that they keep looking good over time. There's different ways to approach the aesthetics of these projects. In some cases, the native plants themselves might look a little wild, but using things like edging, walls, fencing to create order are all beneficial to help with the aesthetics. It's also helpful to group plants together, and that also provides benefits to the pollinators. It can be more efficient for them to find the flower resources. Some plants can be used as edging plants also to help create order within these plantings. So there's a variety of different ways that aesthetics can be addressed in these projects. And if you haven't seen our habitat guide, please check that out. That does have a lot of images in it showing different ways that aesthetics can be incorporated into these projects. Next slide. With working with residents, I think it's really helpful to get a sense from the beginning of how complex of a project they can take on. There'll be some more experienced gardeners, and then there will be people who are very new to establishing pollinator habitat. And we've been encouraging people to start small if they're new to establishing habitat. They can always start with a small planting, using mulch to keep the weeds down. And it's something they can add to over time as they get more familiar with the plants, understanding what they look like, how to control the weeds. And so we have been encouraging people to start small. They don't necessarily have to use all of the funding right away for this program. But there are going to be people too who really do want to take on a more complex project, and that's great. Or they may be adding on to some of their existing plantings. Next slide. Ordinances is something that really varies widely across the state with different cities. I don't think we've seen two ordinances that look alike with cities, and so it's really important to check out local ordinances and see how they're worded about the height of vegetation, the extent of perennial plantings. The boulevards is another area to check in with the city on about planting in boulevards, because they tend to be city property. And so if a boulevard planting is being planned, it's important to have the city provide an okay that that's an area that can be planted. We do have 4 project types that I'll be talking about. And the reason we do have these different project types is that we want to have different options for landowners. And these different types will vary in how they fit with city ordinances. Some may work well, like tree and shrub plantings or smaller pocket plantings. Plantings like larger meadows may not work for every ordinance. And so it's good to have different options. Next slide. So these are our 4 types of projects that we've been promoting for the program. And it's been helpful as a way to educate landowners about different planting options that can benefit pollinators within landscapes. So we have our native pocket plantings, which are essentially smaller native plantings. Quite often the plants are grouped together to create order. But there can be variations of these plantings, such as rain gardens, which would be a depression to collect water as well and have a water quality benefit. Boulevard plantings would be another variation, and then lakeshore buffer plantings, which will help filter water going into water bodies, but also provide habitat for some aquatic insects also. Pollinator beneficial trees and shrubs is another project type, and so that can be funded through this program. There's a wide range of tree and shrub species that are of high value to pollinators, and we have lists of those species in the coaching guide and that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service list. And then pollinator lawns is another type. These can be seeded into bare soil as a pollinator lawn mix. There can be clovers and other flowers seeded into an existing lawn, or containerized plants of clovers or native species could be installed into lawns as well. So there's different options about how these pollinator lawns can be installed and be part of the program. And then pollinator meadows are larger native plantings. They may be similar to a pocket planting and maybe just more extensive, but they could be installed with containerized plants, potentially seed if the goal is to have a larger prairie type planting, or possibly a combination of containerized plants and seed. Next slide, please. One other consideration with working with residents is the areas of their lawn that will be well suited for pollinator habitat. And we like to have residents think about the areas that they use the most within their lawns and what areas they don't currently use. And those areas they're not using as much can be good candidates for pollinator habitat. Many bee species forage in areas of sun, and so those can be good areas for planting. There may be areas like in this image where it's a sloping portion of the lawn that may not get used very much, and that might be a good location to install pollinator habitat. Next slide. And other considerations with siting a planting, definitely thinking about the sun, the amount of sun within different landscapes, areas of moisture. Sometimes areas of higher moisture are areas that aren't used as much within landscapes, and that might be a good area to do a pollinator planting. And we talked about rain gardens as well, that areas where water is being collected to do infiltration can be a great location to install pollinator habitat also. Rain gardens aren't always in the lowest part of the landscape either. Sometimes we locate them further up so that they don't collect too much water. But there is different guidance material out there on installing rain gardens if you're interested in having that, or a resident wants to have that as part of a project as well. Next slide. Maintenance is definitely a big consideration with these projects, and something where we need coaches to help the residents understand what the maintenance expectations are. As we talk about maintenance with residents, we try to keep it as simple as possible. Sometimes we encourage them to do their weeding on Memorial Day, the 4th of July, and Labor Day at a minimum. And those are dates that can be more memorable, that they need to be out there and doing some weeding. I think another key thing with weeding is that it's really important just to keep on top of the weeding. If residents fall behind, then it gets much harder to control the weeds, especially if they're starting to spread, or in the case of woody trees and shrubs, if they're starting to get established, they can be much harder to remove. So we really encourage the residents to keep on top of the weeds, just consider it part of their activity that they're doing outside. Check on their planting, pull out a few weeds here and there, try to keep on top of things as the project progresses. And it's a good way too for them to just check on the project, make sure everything looks okay, that they don't need to do some additional watering or some other needs with the planting, to make sure that it's well maintained and over the course of the program. Next slide.
I'll start talking about the grant requirements. The grantees are aware of the grant requirements. So it's going to be the match that's going to be needed is 25% for any funding that is received. This match can be in the form of purchasing materials, hiring contractors, or is in-kind time spent on planting or maintaining plants. And that's excuse me, at a rate of $25 per hour. Residents are not able to receive this money, but if they are building the project themselves, but it's their hours can count towards the match. So it'd be that at that $25 an hour rate. Okay, so then we have the eligible expenses. So the Minnesota native vegetation is what is eligible for residents. The main thing, there are some limited cultivars that are listed. That is in the coaching guide and in the fact sheet that's within there. The limited cultivars are generally around the bee lawn, excuse me, and also the trees and shrubs. And so there's select trees and shrubs that are eligible, such as the serviceberry and hawthorn. But please refer to that list of the exact ones that are eligible. But in essence, it's all native plant material. The other piece that's eligible is on-site consultation from a landscape designer or contractor, site preparation. So they're doing the sod removal, the tilling, weed control. Weed suppression papers are eligible, and that's a temporary item, not a permanent geotextile fabric or plastic. It's just meant to be a suppression that's temporary. Wood mulch, plants, seeds that are seed mixes or container plants that are native. The folks that are awarded can also apply for the maintenance that's eligible for their project as well. And so this is only through the time period, the 1-year time period of the grant, that they would be turning in the receipts for those products and supplies. And then there's the non-herbicide methods of site preparation and management are preferred. And this is from the Swcd Society. So I really recommend taking a look at the organic site prep method. It covers things from solarization to sheet mulching and sod removal. And then reimbursement requirements. Folks are needing to map their projects. So they'll go onto the Blue Thumb website, and that's where they're going to submit any receipts, paid receipts that are showing the eligible expenses. Before and after photos are really important to show that they completed their project. The match, again, the 25% match. And then they'll be listing out what project they ended up completing and what project size. Also that they agreed to attend a workshop or complete a webinar. And so folks are eligible for up to the $350. But as Dan mentioned, they don't need to spend that full amount. If they're only able to spend $100, that's okay too. It would just be 25% of that amount for the match. So next, go ahead.
Yeah, so now I'm gonna run through the 4 different types of coaching that coaches will be asked to provide to residents, ranging from coaching calls and emails to participating in our workshops through Zoom, tabling at events when that shelter-in-place order is lifted and kind of community participation is encouraged, and on-site consultations, which are also, for the time being, going to be taking place through Zoom. So coaching calls and emails, we will be setting an expectation with residents that coaches have the capacity for 3 coaching calls during the establishment of the project so that you as coaches aren't overwhelmed with calls. We want it to be feasible for you. We don't want you to feel overburdened by the different residents that you're paired with. And it will be up to residents to, it'll be up to coaches to let residents know how much time you have available to provide that assistance through a combination of email and phone calls. We want to encourage that your privacy is maintained during this process. I know that during my own kind of coaching and experience providing expertise to residents, that sometimes they can get a little overzealous with how comfortable they feel contacting a coach. So if you want to keep your number private, you can use the *67 feature on your phone, where you simply type *67 before making the call. This will keep your phone number private when contacting a resident. So that's something that you might want to keep in mind as you contact a resident. Workshop participation, we're planning to have 40 workshops over the next 3 years. And during those workshops, we provide one-on-one assistance to residents. So these workshops are split over 3 hours. So the first hour and a half is a presentation where we go over the Lawns Legumes program, how to create a resilient landscape, etc. And the second half of that contains one-on-one assistance to residents. And that's where we would ask you as coaches to contribute, where the more experts we have, the more time we could spend with each individual resident. So please look out for those online workshops. We can surely use your expertise. Specifically, coaches with experience in landscape design and plant selection. Common examples of coaches that we interact with are master water stewards and master gardeners, individuals who know how to conserve water, select plants to promote pollinators, etc. So with tabling at events, currently we can't table at events as there's no public events due to COVID-19 concerns. But when this ban is lifted, we will ask coaches to participate at these public events. And what we would need you to do is just have a basic understanding of the Lawns Legumes program, its goals, how residents can become involved in the program, and be able to answer any basic questions that someone might have about landscaping, designing for pollinators, etc. You will be provided with handouts at events and kind of FAQs to prepare yourself, remind yourself of any details that you might not remember, kind of a little refresher for anyone who's hoping to table at events when this is permissible. So on-site consultations, in-person consultations like what's imaged on your left, those are currently on hold due to COVID-19, but we are conducting virtual consultations. Individuals who want to learn how to provide those virtual consultations through Zoom, you'll be able to participate in an online Zoom workshop dedicated to that specifically, where myself and other Metro Bloom staff will teach you how to use Zoom and in combination with different mapping tools to conduct an on-site consultation to kind of get a resident started on planning out a new planting. After restrictions are lifted, we will be offering residents one on-site consultation and one call or email to check progress after the on-site. We encourage you to utilize the coaching guide as you conduct these different consultations, different email check-ins, etc. When conducting an on-site consultation, the Lawns Legumes program has developed this little coaching form that'll help you through the process. I myself use this as a template when conducting an on-site consultation, where it just runs through the basics of the information that you want the resident to be comfortable with. What project type they're working with, the type of soil they're dealing with, how much sun or shade the area receives. So this is kind of a nice little template to let you know what kind of information we hope you are able to provide to residents. And also be aware of other resources that Bowser's made available. There's plant lists like what the United States Fish and Wildlife Service has prepared, a list of rusty patch bumblebee friendly species. There's also different planting templates, the habitat guide, which Tara showed earlier, and there's just a bunch more of great resources available on the Blue Thumb, Bowser, and Metro Bloom's websites. So now what we encourage you to do is first and foremost, sign up to be a coach. The more coaches we have, the more individual time we'll be able to commit to residents, and the less of a commitment each coach has to make. We want to make sure that these coaches aren't overburdened, so the more coaches we have, that means the fewer residents you have to focus in on. After this, we'll be connecting residents with their coaches. A survey has been sent to grantees already asking the kind of level of gardening experience that they have and the type of coaching they need, where with these newer residents, they might need a little bit more hand-holding. They might be more inclined to receiving an on-site consultation, but a more experienced gardener might just need some confirmation of plant selection, things of that nature. As you interact with residents, if you have any coaches, my email is listed on this slide. If you want to take a moment to write it down, you can. I'm sure it'll be shared with you through many other mediums, but if you receive any coaches while working with a resident, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm kind of going to be like the point guard for fielding questions, where if I receive a question that I don't know, I'll ship it off to Tara or Dan or any other expert that we have that will be able to give you a really nice answer. And of course, we want you to help spread the word about this program. The way we view it is the more residents that participate in this project, the better. Even if we can't provide funding to everyone, if this helps get DIY projects in the ground, or if we can show legislators that Minnesotans are really supportive of this effort, of this Lawns Legumes program, we might receive continued funding and just get more of that pollinator-friendly habitat in the ground. So follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, use that hashtag Lawns to Legumes, connect with us and help us spread the word about this great program that we are making accessible to Minnesotans. So now we would like to thank all of you who attended today, and we're going to jump into a Q&A. If you haven't opened the Q&A window already, feel free to filter in your own questions, upvote questions that you think are pertinent to you, that you think you could use some more clarification on. And Dan, Tara, and I will get started on that. So John and Mary Jewel, at this time, if you could sort through the questions and let us know what people have in mind.
Hi, this is Mary Jewel. So far, we just have a few questions, and just a quick reminder, if you can put those in the Q&A section as opposed to the chat, that would be great. First question that we could answer live is, can funding be used for maintenance of existing prairies or meadows, such as burnings or reseeding?
Yeah, I can answer that question. It's actually a really good question, and it's something that is maybe a gray area. The program is really focused on establishing new habitat, and so the majority of the maintenance should be focused on new plantings or new habitat. There may be some cases where there is some existing plantings that are being supplemented, And then it would be appropriate to do some of the maintenance or use some of the funding for maintenance within those landscapes. And so there might be more flowers added to an existing prairie planting, and then it would make sense to use some of the maintenance funding for maintaining that planting.
Yeah, to confirm what Dan said, what we've been telling residents at workshops is pretty much exactly that, where if you're expanding on a pre-existing planting, then you can do maintenance to the entire planting as a whole. But if you are just looking to do that maintenance on a surface that already exists that you're not adding to, that wouldn't be eligible.
Next question. What is the maximum number of residents a coach can have at one time?
I don't think we have a maximum number, but we're trying to limit them 3 to 5 folks, I believe, to kind of make it manageable.
I think it'll be up to individual coaches as well. If we do have coaches that do want to take on more residents, you know, we might be open to that. I think we'll see, since this is the first time we've done this, we'll be trying to keep it to a smaller number of residents just to see how it goes. And one of our next steps will be to get more information from the residents about what type of coaching they need. And some of the coaching, if it's more with phone calls or emails, may be less time consuming if it's compared to site consultations or that type of coaching.
We have a clarifying question about the match. To clarify the 25% match, if a homeowner spends $100 on lawns to legumes projects, would they receive $25 max?
They wouldn't receive that $25, but it'd be that 25% match to go towards it. So if they are putting in 1 hour worth of time to install it, that would count towards the match for that $100 amount of the grant. So just like if it was $350 that they reached the full amount, the 25% would be $88. So roughly, so 3.5 hours to 4 hours for time spent on it.
Yeah, the match is a requirement for awardees to input into the total project. All right, next question. Could a church host a demonstration garden?
Well, this is, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so and Tara, you can fill in the blanks here, but I believe a church would not be eligible to host a demonstration garden as only, as these projects are only eligible on residential properties. So since a church would not be considered a residential area, they would not be eligible for such funding.
Yep. There's still a lot of great resources available on the website if they're interested in planting templates or other resources to look into.
Next question is, at what point do folks submit their receipts?
That'll be once they complete their project and have worked through all the items that were required. It's also on the Blue Thumb webpage where they signed up to be an applicant. It shows on their website all the items that are required. So they have that year to complete the project. So if they get done earlier, they can submit their receipts at that time once they have all their items in place to upload and map their project.
Here's the next question. Could a homeowner stack grants? Meaning, could they receive a district watershed grant for a rain garden and a lawns to legume grant to purchase plants?
I can answer that one. Yeah, they can definitely do that. It's actually encouraged. It might be a good way to do a rain garden in addition to a pollinator planting. And so bringing in additional funding sources is a good way to maximize the habitat and potentially increase the size of the planting.
We have another question about matching coaches with residents. Tell us again how residents get matched with coaches.
Well, we're going to be working on that in the coming weeks here. We're going to pair them up with their abilities. So a lot of the awardees had a survey kind of listing out their expertise on gardening, listing what type of needs they had if they needed a coach or if they were going to do it on their own. And then we're going to pair up the coaches also based on what their needs are and abilities. So that's to come.
Next question is, can coaches see who was awarded grants or choose from residents in their area, or will they be assigned at random?
I think we're planning to try to, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but James, but we're trying to pair them with people in their area, but we're looking for coaches across the whole state. Right now, because some of the stuff is online or calling or emailing, people are able to be paired up with folks, you know, throughout the state as well. But we want to make sure they're also in the same area since they're familiar with the setting.
Yeah, I would add too, if as a coach, if you know a recipient and you're really interested in working with them, we'd be open to that as well. If you want to contact us and let us know that you know of a resident that you're interested in coaching.
Next question we have is, will coaches be asked to reconfirm their participation in the second round? Or are you assuming they will be coaches after the second round of grants are awarded too?
I think they will be on the same list for the second round. We're hoping to have 3 rounds too, so more to come.
Yeah, we'll need to just keep communication with coaches as we move ahead. I would agree that our current thought is that we'll keep all the coaches on the list moving ahead for the second round, and the third round we have less funding for, so we'll currently have less residents. We are pursuing additional funding, so hopefully we can keep things moving ahead. But to the extent we can, we'd love to keep you all engaged as coaches moving ahead. But we understand that things change too. So we'll just have to keep in touch and communicate as the program progresses.
Our next question is there a site to view photos of different pocket gardens as a means to generate ideas?
So Dan, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that's something that you and John Bly, who's doing the tech for us today, I believe that's something that you're currently working on, developing a gallery of pre-existing plantings that residents could use as an example.
That's correct. It's something that we've thought it is important for this program, since we have these 4 project types, that we give some idea of what these look like. And that's something that we'll continue building as we move ahead. There is some images up on the Metro Bloom site. I'll actually let John jump in here and talk a little bit more about that. But that is something that we have definitely thought is important for the program.
Yes, it's something we realize that we don't have that many good photos of these plantings right now. What we do have, either it's up on the Blue Thumb site or it is in a queue to get up on the Blue Thumb site. But if any of you have photos of any of these planting types, you can send them to me, and with permission, I will get them up on the site, and so then we can provide those kind of inspiration for other people.
I would add too, the one other resource is the habitat guide for the program. And that does talk about the 4 project types, gives some detail about how to go about planning those types, and that does have some images within that habitat guide. So definitely check that out if you haven't seen that document.
Our next question is, what is the best bee-friendly removal of quack grass? To pull it or cut it at the base?
I would probably try to pull it, or if you're able to smother it and cover it temporarily to try to kill it that way too. But if you're able to sod cut it out, that might be an option as well. Use a sod cutter, like a manual sod cutter, to kind of take that first inch or so of soil off.
Yeah, and I would agree, if you can remove that root mass. It's such an aggressive spreader that if you can use a sod cutter or a spade, some way to just remove that soil, maybe create a berm somewhere else, that may be the most efficient way to deal with that. Unless you have a very extensive area, then it gets more complicated. But trying to get rid of the root mass is definitely helpful.
Next question we have, if a landowner applied for funding during the first round of applications, but were not selected, will they automatically be included for the next round, or do they have to reapply?
There's no need to reapply. Their applications are automatically being rolled over to the next round of funding. And that'll stay true through the 3rd round as well.
Next question is, when will you hold the online Zoom class for coaches?
Yeah, so that's something that John and I have been working on. Right now, we're kind of structuring them that they're in line with our workshops. But as we send emails out, so currently those emails have been going out to master gardeners and master water stewards for those trainings. But I imagine we will be able to expand those to notify interested coaches as well. John is giving me a head nod of approval. So yes, going forward, we'll send out notifications to interested coaches. And they'll align with our workshops.
How are residents directed to the list of permissible plants, shrubs, and trees? Is it the Metro Blooms website or another website?
One is on the Bowser website through the coaching guide, and it's also on the main Lawns to Legumes page under the individual support section of the grant. There's a link to the eligible expenses right there. And then James, is it also on your website? Oh, yeah.
Better unmute myself.
Yep.
John, can you confirm that? Have we placed it on the Blue Thumb or Metro Bloom site?
I will double check right after this. It should. I believe it's on the main Lawns to Legumes page on Blue Thumb, but if not, it will be very soon.
Thank you, John.
Our next question is, what total number of coaches are you hoping to sign up?
I would say there's really no upper limit there, but Dan, I see you've unmuted yourself as well.
Well, we do have 400, or roughly 400 people that have received funding for the individual support so far, and we'll be adding more in the 2nd round. So, ideally, I would say it would be great to have 200 coaches, and I think we'll kind of have to build to get there. If you know others that could potentially be coaches, we definitely invite you to invite them to watch this webinar and see if they would be interested in being coaches also.
Our next question is, I know several of these native wildflowers have red cultivars. This includes certain bee balms and others. Should we steer grantees away from these if the goal is to attract rusty patch bumblebees that may, sorry, my dog.
That's okay.
I'm home alone, so I have no one to stop him. I know several of these native wildflowers have red cultivars. Should we steer grantees away from these if the goal is to attract rusty patch bumblebees that may not be attracted to that red color?
Yeah, I can take this one. First of all, I love to see such like a question that shows such great bee knowledge and awareness. And whoever asked this question is right on point where the bees' visual spectrum, they can't distinguish reds from greens. So if you've got some red flowers in the midst of turf grass or nearby other green vegetation, it's going to be really difficult for that bee to pick out the flower from all the other vegetation that's present. So I would definitely say if you can, encourage them to not use such a cultivar. In fact, Bowser across the board, we encourage the use of native plants in favor of cultivars. So staying clear of red plants and sticking to native straight species rather than cultivars is recommended across the board. But great to see someone with a knowledge of bees and their visual spectrum. That's fun.
I would add too, with our funding source, we can only reimburse for native plant species through this program. And there are some links like in the coaching guide to the DNR list of vendors that supplies native plants. If residents want to add additional plants into their landscapes, they're welcome to do that. Or if they want to do some transplanting within their landscape, they're welcome to do that. But for reimbursement, we can only cover native plant species.
Next question is if we're going to release numbers of how many applications we've seen for individual support in each city or region of the state to kind of help coaches plan ahead for what kind of interest they'll see.
Do you want? Oh.
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess we haven't really thought about doing that. We've gone through one round of funding, and we do have a map that shows where all the applications were around the state, and and we can definitely provide that information if it's of interest. And it was encouraging that it was distributed around the state. There was definitely a higher concentration right in the Twin Cities metro area. But it was great to see that there was interest all over the state. And we had a slightly higher chance of getting funded if they're in the rusty patch bumblebee zones, and so that influenced some of the final awards. But I guess getting back to your question on the information, that's something we'll talk more about, whether we can maybe post that that map somewhere, or at least somehow have it available if coaches are interested in that information.
We received a question about native plant sales, places to get these native plants. If anybody knows of any native plant sales that are still happening this spring or this year, you can let me know and I'll get that information up on, we'll try to list native plant sales on Blue Thumb's calendar. As of right now, the only native plant sale I know that's on is Landscape Revival in Oakdale, which has been postponed until September 19th of this year. But I assume there'll be more, and the Blue Thumb calendar will have all of them that I know of.
Yeah, and in general, we do get a lot of questions about residents wondering where they can source plants. So we often refer them to Wild Ones, which has a great, almost like directory of different native plant providers. They ensure that these plant providers use kind of best practices like no use of neonicotinoids, things of that nature. And there's, even if you can't buy plants in person right now, there are a lot of really great online resources where they allow for curbside pickup. They'll deliver the plants to your home. So providers like Minnesota Native Landscapes, Glacial Ridge, there's a lot of really great options out there.
Great. What's the relationship between individual grant coaches and community grant coaches with the demonstration neighborhoods?
That sounds like maybe they're referring to the demonstration neighborhood. So the individual grant, the individual support portion of the Lawns to Legumes program is the only one that will be doing the coaching, where we're pairing up the awardees with coaches. The demonstration neighborhoods are already awarded to different community or different cities, soil and water conservation districts, nonprofits around the state. And they're going to be kind of acting as their own, coaching folks that they're getting involved into the grants for the demonstration neighborhoods.
Okay, and how will coaching funds be distributed to SWCDs that have coaches signed up?
I think for that, we're still kind of, we're in the beginning stages of that answer at the moment. We're kind of right now figuring out how many coaches we have statewide and kind of seeing where there's some areas that could use additional coaches and potentially reaching out to SWCDs in those areas, as well as some of the ones that have reached out to us already. So we're kind of in the beginning of that at the moment.
All right. Are we in greater need of coaches for residents or coaches to assist at workshops?
That's a good question. I would say the need is equal. I wouldn't prioritize one over the other. I would say right now, while we're doing these workshops virtually, it is a little bit more difficult to navigate these one-on-ones virtually than in person. So the more hands on deck, the better. But I would say both are high priority, and I don't want to prioritize one over the other.
All right, it is 1 o'clock. Are we gonna go over, or are we going to, and if we could end it, and everyone else who submitted a question, we have your name and we can get back to you with an answer, or we can stick around.
Should we just go 5 more minutes and just try to get through several more questions?
Sure.
All right. Yeah. Thanks everyone who's got to leave right at 1. Thanks for tuning in. We'll wrap these up pretty quick. Okay, so this is a question about, is it possible to do a larger residential demonstration garden in a neighborhood? So it's about the distinction between the individual support and the demonstration neighborhoods.
I guess if they're interested in doing, if they're signing up for the individual support, they can do a project, at any scale that they choose. The grant is only for the $350. The demonstration neighborhood portion of the Lawns to Legumes program has already been allocated to select grantees around the state, and so that's entailing those awardees to kind of reach out to the community members. They are posted on our website, but a lot of them already have folks in mind that they're going to be working with. So it's kind of, I guess, there's 2 different programs, but also if they're wanting to have their own resident have a larger showcase of a project, one of the 4 types of projects, that's a good thing. It just would be through the individual support grant.
Yeah, I think some of our jargon here might have been confusing, where these demonstration neighborhood grants, they're not for one larger continuous garden on one specific residence. They're to bring residents from a community together to showcase how we can kind of redesign our lawn areas to support pollinators, rather than having green concrete or turf grass, whatever you prefer to call it, as the kind of lone standing vegetation on a residence. So it's not for one large residential planting, but it's for bringing a community of individuals together. That's what the purpose of these demonstration neighborhoods are.
James, I just want to add to that quickly. The way I think about demonstration neighborhoods is they're almost mini programs within a specific community. They're handled by local organizations. So that's kind of the way that I like to think about them. Just wanted to add that.
Is there a list of the awarded demonstration neighborhoods somewhere we can point folks to in the chat?
Yes, I can send a link in the chat.
All right. So then 2 more questions. This is a good one. Will there be a way to communicate for coaches to communicate with each other about individual support and community demonstration involvement in the program? Possibly a Facebook group, some kind of way to share info, best practices, pictures of work.
It's kind of a pretty great idea, and if not, I think it would be quite easy for us to make a Facebook page for that. Yeah, maybe we could communicate with the coaches and find out what their preferred medium is, and whether it's a Facebook page or something else, we could set something up where coaches could share resources and questions with one another. That's a fantastic idea. Whoever, is that Daniel Schultz?
Yep.
Yeah,
Daniel
great idea,
Schultz.
Daniel. Thank you.
Okay, last question. I know you are asking grantees to map their project. Will this information be available along with the maps of where the demonstration projects are located? It would be great to see.
Yeah, the demonstration grants are also mapping their project, and so there would be in the future maps of both.
And these maps are set up on a web page. So there's links in the coaching guide to get to the mapping page, to have residents do mapping. We are encouraging people to map even if they didn't receive funding for this program, because we want to see a larger picture of where habitat is being installed across the state. And there's 2 different icons on that map, one for people that were funded and one for people that have done projects on their own.
And I've got no more open questions.
Okay, so then I guess we'll close up shop over here. And I certainly want to thank everyone who attended today. We hope that if you haven't signed up to become a coach today, then you will appreciate that upon exiting this presentation, you will receive a link that brings you directly to the sign up to be a coach page. And yeah, we hope that you are able to connect with residents and really help them with the installation of those pollinator-friendly plantings. I see we've got Sarah Foltz-Jordan with us today, so if you use that organic site prep document, be sure to shoot her a thank you, as I believe she was the key author on that, putting that together. But yeah, thank you everyone who attended today, and we hope to start pairing you with residents as soon as possible. Dan and Tara, any closing remarks?
I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. It's great to have so many people on this webinar, and we look forward to working with the coaches as we move ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to end this meeting. Take care.